I wanted to launch a CUBE satellite, and it's expensive, right, today. Maybe $50,000 at best, more like $100,000 including the launch.
And the 100K for us did not include any launch vehicle stuff whatsoever.
I mean, they gave you 100K in the grant, right?
Right. So that was just
you could find a launch vehicle for 70K. And
right. That was completely aside of that, right?
Right. And I know in academic projects they often can get a lot of help finding a launch vehicle and so forth. But for a private citizen to try to put together a project like this, you pretty much just have to fund it yourself. And so I was trying to think of a way to fund it. How could I get 10,000 people willing to send me a few bucks each and not actually participate in the project directly? You know, you can't have 10,000 people in a lab trying to put pieces together. Right. And that was the part I really wanted to do, like, you know, myself. I wanted to be very involved in building.
So how much money would you need? You want how much
well, so I'm thinking, you know, it's on the order of $100,000. $200,000 makes it much more likely, but I don't think it needs to be that high. Anyway, I created this idea called We Cast That Message. The idea was to just let people send in little recordings that are broadcast by this satellite, find a way for them to enjoy that as it goes overhead or whatever. Unfortunately, it's difficult, you know, because ham radio frequency can really make money off of the use of that. But that was my idea, was just try to find some way of letting people create a little note that they can, you know, have broadcast from the satellite. And you can schedule it for when it's over their area or whatever it is, you know, just kind of this random thing. Sell T-shirts along with that. You know, because you could take thousands of people's messages in that way and make them available. In the end, my project kind of stalled because I wasn't sure I could get around the licensing and logistics issues.
I'd like to just throw this in there, is that NASA is actually very interested in helping foster the growth of the small sat arena, and they're actually getting ready to release an announcement of opportunity to potentially, if you can develop your CubeSat and put it all together, there will be launch opportunities off of ISS cargo resupply launches off of the SpaceX vehicles.
Oh.
That's kind of cool.
Now,
yeah, I could tag on that a little bit too. And I have to admit to being one of the opposition to the CubeSat movement. But one of the things that NASA is looking at doing.
Wait, I have to ask, why are you in opposition?
Well, let me get to the good news first, and then because I lost my argument. But what NASA is looking at doing is at an appropriate time in the development of the life cycle of any project that we launch, whether it's on the way to space station or anywhere else, looking at sequestering some mass so that they could put CubeSat dispensers on board the second stage of the rockets. Mm-hmm. And that would open up a lot of opportunity for this sort of thing. So.
You know, I was willing to liquidate my retirement to fund one of these, but it wasn't quite enough to make it worthwhile, you know.
There is a cart before horse issue with that, and that is you have to design your satellite for the particular orbit that you want it to live in. But then you get your free ride, and it's not the same orbit. And so it's kind of, you're not going to get your free ride until you build the thing, but you've got to build it to comply with the environment it's going to be put in by your free ride. And so you end up this tension in that you can't really start building it, but you're not going to get the ride until you have.
Right? Yeah, you could be on a trajectory to Mars and only get a few hours of communication time before it's out of range. You know?
I'm talking something as simple as going from a 50-some-odd degree inclination to near polar.
Yep.
It's a completely different place for a satellite to live.
There are probably a lot of missions that can do any of them.
You'd have to change how that spacecraft operates, depending on where it goes. So I'm really intrigued by the fact that you were willing to liquidate your retirement. And I'm not making fun of you for that at all, because I think that may be a really good point. Why? Why would you do that?
You know, it was watching the Mir landing happen was so exciting. You know, it's kind of like you're sitting there, this thing that you worked on for so many years, and wondering whether or not it's going to survive. You know, and that euphoria that took over the room. And I thought it's the same thing. You know, you worked on the satellite for a couple of years, and off it goes. You have no idea if you did it right. You know, and then you hear that first beacon or whatever, and you start to communicate with it. And that I wanted to do that. I just wanted to experience that.
That's participatory exploration.
If,
that's
if
what
I
you're
could
really
do real
talking
science
about, right?
along with it would be great. But I just wanted to go through the motions of getting a piece of hardware up there.
But I think that's maybe the disconnect that we have in the general public. I'm a pretty big, I've been pretty vocal about saying that nobody cares about what we're meeting here today. Nobody cares. You can go on the street right now and nobody cares. Nobody remembers that the space shuttle was retired. My parents are here today, and 6 months ago did not know that there are going to be no more space shuttles, right? In 1969, my mom stayed up in the middle of the night. She was 19, right, to watch them land on the moon. They had no idea. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they, in 2010, for somebody like Noah, right, for him to feel like he's contributing, like he's participating, there are so many things that are screaming his name that he can participate in. And space seems really far away. Right, and I just think that's the kind of work that we need to think about to get people.
But space does have people that want to participate. To go with your idea of being able to send messages out, like call it sort of proxy in space. They can't go there, but they want to send a proxy. NASA missions have included that. You know, the get your name on the mission to Mars.
But I don't think people in general feel connected to that. And I mean the broader.
They get a huge sign up on people, so there still is.
Millions.
Well, I'm not saying that all hope is lost. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm trying to come up with some ideas. I'm trying to think about some ideas so that, okay, we've got this 100,000 people, but I'd really like it to be 100 million, right? And that becomes so. What I was thinking about, and I'll be done in a second. I like to see a future in 15 years where I'm looking in Make Magazine. I don't know if you guys ever look at Make Magazine, but I'd like to see in Make Magazine an idea for participatory space exploration, where we're hitting that common hacker culture.
It's going to be in there.
Well, and that's what I think that's the kind of the forward progress we want to see. I'm not trying to naysay what we're doing.
Interorbital would make that happen at $8,000 for the entire kit and launch.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anyone here connected to Interorbital.
Not connected, but I bought one of their kits. I'm queued for the first one. Project Calliope is launching when they do their first launch. I have a free refly if they blow up.
Annual expense for a hobby.
It's a midlife crisis is my thing. I could buy a motorcycle or I could launch a satellite. Seriously, it's a motorcycle.
But
I have an $8,000 car.
And that's what you get inspired.
Is Interorbital for real? I'm very skeptical.
Will they succeed? I don't know. It's rocket science. Are they for real?
They were so interested in talking to me when I expressed an interest in their TubeSat program. When I said, does my money go into an escrow account that I get back if you never launch? They stopped talking to me. So, that raised red flags for me. And I really want them to succeed, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I really want
If you don't have to have a free flyer, there are other options. For example, on the space station now, we have two Nanocubes platforms. Essentially, they use the CubeSat form factor, but it plugged up to 16 1U form factors can essentially plug into this frame that fits inside an express rec locker, and using a USB interface, essentially every so often one of the crew comes by, downloads everything off of the frame onto their laptop, and the data is sent back down over the standard station data link, which then goes to the Nanocubes and Kentucky Space folks, and they give the data out to their customers.
If I had an actual science experiment, that would probably be great. But
it's not just science. They're also doing partnerships for education, private industry. They've got customers that have said, we don't want to talk to NASA, and they don't have to because Nanocubes handles all that for them. There's also going to be opportunities with Dragon Lab. I've heard that Dragon Lab, that SpaceX and the Nanocubes folks have actually been talking about essentially doing things like, if you're not really ready for prime time on the station, but you're not really ready for prime time to do a free flyer either, maybe you could do a test run by putting your design on the Dragon Lab, which would sit for about 2 to 4 weeks. So there are other opportunities that are out there, and I know for a fact that the Nanocubes folks, they do the insurance that you were talking about that concerned you, that you couldn't get with that other opportunity. Nanocubes does actually they were able to set up a mechanism so that they can get insurance for whatever level of payload that you're paying for.
So what kind of things could I do with one?
I'll take the example of
Whatever you want.
Well, I mean, that's, so give me some
Are
examples.
these outward facing on the ISS?
Right now, both of the racks that are on orbit are inside the U.S. operating segment, but I've heard there is interest in having an external.
Because the Japanese have some that are outside facing. If you have inside facing, then you could, inside you want to do microgravity, biology,
Yes.
genetics, making diamonds in space. You could do anything that you can fit the fabricating gear and have an astronaut operate it for you if need be. The outside facing ones are if you want to put a sensor or a detector or do a project such as that. So it goes kind of with, you choose your mission based on what location you want and hope you get your location.
Right.
How much do the nanoracks 1U cost?
I think for I don't know how much they're charging their commercial customers, but I think for things like education, I think it's only $10,000.
And that includes being flown up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're flying under the allocation that we get in the National Lab Office.
Let me throw in the example of the UK AMSAT community. I was at a conference last year and they announced FunCube. Now, obviously AMSAT people want a repeater that they can speak to on UHF and speak to someone in Germany who's listening in on VHF or whatever. But they realised that it's almost impossible to get the money together and the launch together to do it just for a bunch of ham radio enthusiasts to speak to one another. And so they added an educational element, and they're actually adding a rudimentary material science experiment onto this 1U CubeSat. They got a £50,000 grant from kind of a radio kind of charity in the UK. From their own money, they found the £50,000 they need to get the thing into space. And it's going to function as a bounce off for ham radio enthusiasts. But this material science experiment is going to be accessible by schools. And then the challenge becomes, well, how do the schools, they need $1,500, $2,000, $5,000 worth of stuff to listen to this thing. They've actually made, it's a breadboard right now, but they think they can boil this down thing to being significantly less than a $20 bill of parts that will be able to hear this satellite and downlink data in real time, like 400 bits a second. And so any school in the UK, in Europe, over here, will be able to download that live data from this material science experiment on the satellite for something that any school could afford. And going on the messages thing, one thing they're going to do is they're actually, in the whole string of telemetry, this thing will be looping through, there'll be real-time telemetry from the satellite and like this bunch of 4 message slots or 8 message slots, and people will they'll be able to put messages onto them, and then the schools will be able to get them down. The long link in the chain, as far as I've learned, is downlink. You can have all the CubeSats in the world, but downlink is a real problem because
it will be bandwidth limited.
It's low. They're very low data rates and very bitty com. But ESA, in collaboration with many AMSAT people in Europe, are coming up with something called GENSO, which will be essentially a distributed listening system. So any ham radio enthusiast with suitable equipment will be able to run this piece of software on their machine and totally uninvolved. They can go on holiday for 2 weeks, and their ground station will, by command of some sort of GENSO central server, will be told, oh, listen to this one, it's coming overhead now, oh, now listen to this one, now listen to this one. And the end users of those satellites will get their data in real time from ground stations all around the world. So
distributed tracking network.
It's, exactly that. And it means, imagine some Danish guys launching a CubeSat, and it gets deployed somewhere over Russia, and then they have to wait maybe 3 hours until it's even overhead for them. And then they get it, and then they've lost it for another 24 hours. And so, particularly in the management of some CubeSats, often they work for a very long time. They work for 10 minutes till the batteries are flat, but they don't work at all. In that tiny window of mad panic, where you think, oh my god, the satellite's something wrong with it. If you've got distributed listening and transmission around the planet, you can have the opportunity to be able to actually, GENSO will be able to say, but this satellite's coming through, it needs help. We'll all track this one as it comes through. and add some sort of redundancy and ability to look after these satellites on a regular basis and get a lot more data down from them as well.
But you bring up one problem with the microsatellites in general is failure. Whoever's doing it has to go in for a failure rate. Mortgaging your life savings to do this is a great thing if you know it's going to work.
Oh,
but
no,
if your
I-
engineering
that
fails
was
and
the
it
reason.
fails,
Like, you know,
you might be disappointed. And if you're a school that you spend all your money on that, you might be disappointed. In academia, when they do sounding rockets for grad projects, you can do your PhD even if the sounding rocket blows up because the construction is the point. So university programs that are building CubeSats, the engineering is the focus. They don't have that problem. But there is a risk of overselling. Schools can participate in this and that, and then having a high failure rate being disillusioning.
Well, that's why pre-testing it on a cruiser-like platform. You know, where's Dave Maston when you need him?
Upstairs.
Yeah.
It's good, but when you're at the $10,000 price point, you're not going to be doing that.
Dave's service, when he gets it, is not $10,000 a flight. He'll get your CubeSat to 100 kilometers, well, when his vehicles are up to it. And I don't want to represent it, but at one point I bought a slot on his bird for $450 for a CanSat. One flight.
Is that orbital or ballistic?
No, suborbital. But it'll get you to 100 kilometers.
Sure.
It'll get you exposed to vacuum, G environment, vibration, EMI. I mean, 90% of what you need.
My understanding is that the Nanorex folks have been talking to Dave Maston and the other cruiser folks.
And them and Armadillo and, you know.
That actually brings up something else I was thinking about trying to do. You know, I wanted to build my own vibration and vacuum thermal testing facilities.
It's cheaper to fly in a Maston bird.
What's that?
It might be cheaper to fly in a Maston bird.
It might be, but
At 450, yeah, you're
you know, I
right.
was thinking about that. You know, it's like, what would it take? Because I used to work at a company at Crossbow, and we had a vibration table and some thermal testing stuff. And you know, it was kind of cobbled together stuff, but I think you can still do a perfectly
You can look
balanced
up
testing.
DIY vacuum chamber. I'm building one. I mean, the DIY plans are out
And the
there.
thought was, you know, can I provide this as a service to other CubeSat people? I don't need a giant Goddard-sized thermal vacuum testing chamber. I need one that's this big and that I can hold the little CubeSat. And maybe I could provide very low-cost testing services as well, you know, to help offset my own investment in the thing. But
Sure.
it was just something I was thinking about. You know.
So then I have a question. What are you, so assuming that you could launch a CubeSat, the price didn't matter at this point, what would you guys do with it? Explain what you're doing one more time with yours.
Okay, launching a series of sensors, magnetic, thermal, light, and it's going to be going in polar orbit through the ionosphere, and it's going to return that information sonified as MIDI data, essentially down as sheet music, so musicians can work that in, remix it, and put it into works royalty-free. The other advantage of sonification is it gives you an intuitive sense of what's going on. You're hearing the tempos and the amount of activity there, not a number measure, but actually hearing, is this an active environment? Is this a region with quick transitions? So it'll give a more intuitive sense to people of just how interesting and active the ionosphere is, especially during solar events.
What's its name?
Project Calliope. ProjectCalliope.com. Thank you. I always forget to push it as much as I should. But it's all using off-the-shelf parts. I mean, there's the kit that Interorbital gets. You get PCB boards fabricated from one of the online PCB board fabricators. I'm getting my sensors from IQVX up in Canada. They make them for mostly performance artists and people doing hobbyist stuff. So they're little grain of wheat kind of detectors for magnetic fields and such. And they're helping you recalibrate for the expected environment. I'm building a DIY vacuum chamber that's about half done. It's just going to be a little hand-pumped one, but it's going to get low enough that I can do most of the main outgassing and basic, you know, RMAX soldered weld holding and such testing. And I can see then, do I need to go to a university, or if he set up his private test facility there, but I'm doing basic testing there. Now, Interorbital will do their own testing, so my testing is really to make sure that it works and will pass their testing. So there is a bit with that. But again, it ended up being, I thought it was going to be this engineering challenge, and all of the blogging about it, the getting people to help will be easy. And like any project, it turns out it's all very easy, off-the-shelf stuff, DIY, and getting other people engaged in it and writing about it and keeping up with the documentation and project management is the largest component. So that's just been my experience. Well, we're at the point where engineering is not the hard part anymore.
There's a question from the chat room, and I guess also sort of an idea here. Question with NanoRacks, which, the stuff on the ISS, given, a kilogram in some set dimensions, if they wanted to fly a mouse with pulse and breathing monitoring and stuff like that, is that something that they would be allowed to do? I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that.
Yeah,
I know you can do insects.
It's going to be a pissed off mouse, that's for sure.
Well, that's actually, it's kind of uncanny given the discussion we recently had with some folks from Japan about wanting to do something similar. And the biggest problem with that is because it's a live animal, there are a lot of contingency requirements that NASA places on live animal harbor. That's why we've only successfully flown mice on the space station the one time with the Italian mice drawer system, and it was such a pain in the butt that a lot of people never want to do it again. And so it's possible, but there are a lot of hoops that people would have to jump through because of essentially the life support and contingency requirements that are involved in working with live animals.
And if you do it for K-12 education, PG County Science Fair policy says no live animals of any kind. So some of the STEM and education ones may have
bacteria,
additional insects. You can go up to insects in general.
So for example, under the CGBA science inserts programs, we've done things like we've flown the butterflies and stuff like that. Anything below insect level or below is fairly easy to get away with, just because their life support requirements are so low that you can essentially throw most of what they need inside their habitat, and you don't have to worry about waste and air circulation and stuff like that. But anything mammalian, you get into some heavy duty requirements work.
Worth noting that the Russians, in general, regret sending Laika, the first dog, into space.
Yeah.
The acknowledgement was it was basically a political stunt. It didn't serve science, and it was not fair. The dog was sent on a one-way trip, although some people had thought that there was a plan of recovery. There was not.
Never.
And so if you are doing animals in space, the negative PR, regardless of your own moral stance, may come into it. And the fact that other scientists who have done this now regret it is worth noting.
That may be something that perhaps the commercial space folks might end up getting more of a niche for that, because they're not subject to a lot of the same requirements that government-sponsored flight.
Yeah, but for them,
the Japanese could launch a whale into space because they have that whaling exemption.
but for a commercial company, the negative PR is much harder to ignore.
That's true. That's true.
And PETA will be on them too. So.
That's true.
That's going to be much harder.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
What do you want to do?
I don't know. It's matching the room.
Kind of
we can kind of talk and talk and talk, but if nobody does anything and we just all sit around and talk,
well,
from
where I sit in the National Lab Office, we're seeing lots of people that are already built, that have already either built or are building small sets that are looking for opportunities to fly, coming in and knocking on our door now that we're going to be flying Peapod launchers on SpaceX vehicles.
And I collectively would agree with that's a good thing, right? Yeah. So how can we move that along?
I guess it's a matter of getting the word out more that there are going to be opportunities to fly in the coming years. So if you're serious about building something, it's time to step up to the plate and get in the queue.
Now, can we go ahead and start building our thing on our own and just come to you when it's nearly done?
If you can build something on your own and demonstrate that it's a viable concept, and if I remember correctly, there will be a standing announcement of opportunity to apply against to get flight slots.
So the actual mission you're flying is important. It'll be selected based on what your mission is, right?
I think it's not so much because this is geared towards fostering commercial industry and education. It's going to be more about the viability of your concept as opposed to judging the value.
I mean, like engineering viability.
Right. we're essentially it's going to be a feasibility assessment more so than a value assessment, because we're trying to get, at least in terms of fostering commercial industry and educational opportunities, we're trying to get NASA out of the mindset of essentially picking and choosing who we think is more valuable than anybody else. It's going to be a matter of fostering opportunities for people to prove to themselves and to prove to their investors and their stakeholders what the value is.
So you're going to be judging the people creating the mission rather than the mission itself, it sounds like. Like, are they capable of delivering a working mission? Is that really what it is?
Well, I think if you can bring completed, viable hardware to the table, that would be...
Building a CubeSat is cheap. Most of the cost, it's a standard platform, most of the cost is for launch, and you don't have to front pay that. If you are a hobbyist or you have a school you want to work at, building one is a worthy exercise unto itself. And then you can try and get a slot, either through the grant, through a commercial company, a high altitude balloon that you guys build as a second project, or just say, we made a cool satellite, good job, you've all graduated. I mean, there's...
I was already...
You can get a balloon for $100.
He was just looking over my shoulder, because I was going to mention something. If your project doesn't go as far as building a satellite and getting it launched, or building something satellite-esque and having it hosted in the ISS, or Dragon, or have Manston send it 100K and back, I've been involved in 2 altitude balloon flights before I left the UK. Significantly less than $500 for absolutely everything involved.
I have 2 balloons I intend to launch this summer too. One was to test my link.
I literally, it was a 45-pound Canon PowerShot camera with very, very easily hacked firmware. I am not a code monkey, but this was easy to do. That just took pictures and movies all afternoon from 33 kilometers high. That's about as close to space as remember the public can get to that really pretty easily. I mean, it's very, very analogous to going all the way.
And you were able to recover it because?
Basically, if you're a better techno person, you have simple ham radio transmitter, literally transmitting 10 milliamps, and it's basically saying, I'm a balloon, this is my latitude, this is my longitude, this is my altitude, and it just keeps repeating that. Now, you don't even need expensive ham radio kit to pick that up. Or you can even cheat and use like stuff like APRS. You don't even need any equipment. People are even going as far as just chucking in a smartphone and saying, send me a text message when you land it. And then you just go and get it.
Nice.
Get it, take your memory card out, bingo, you got 1,000 photographs from the edge of space.
Ray Bradbury used to say that his philosophy was jump off the cliff and build the wings as you fall. And I think a lot of the microsatellite stuff is, reach to the DIY and the university communities and have them start building them.
Because the feedback that we've been getting is that a lot of people have been hesitant to take that leap because they were waiting for flight opportunities. So now we're trying to get the message out there that whether, like you said, whether you fly on SpaceX or Manston or anybody else, there are going to be opportunities to fly if you're willing to put in the effort to make it happen.
Now, you've mentioned flight hardware. Would NASA take a mission that says, we're done, we've built our main one, and our flight's fair and done some basic testing on it? Would they take that preferential to another mission that was only in the concept phase, even if the concept was cooler?
I think that my understanding from what I've been told is that is going to be essentially judged on a case-by-case basis. They don't want to necessarily prejudge anyone before they come to the table.
Are the criteria going to be published?
Yes. The criteria.
Do you think
should
having
be,
actual hardware would
the
be one of the
criteria will be
criteria?
in the standing AO.
Would have actual hardware, do you think that might make it into the criteria, or is that going to be
I
a
think-
soft constraint?
I think that will be in there, but it will be a soft constraint.
So do you have opportunities for the community to engage? Like are you going to hold a workshop or something so that, because I'm sure there's lots of people with lots of questions like about what they're asking.
Jim, you never said why you're opposed to them. Confess.
Notice that, huh?
Well, because I come from the traditional NASA background, and I know what it's like to try and get a $500 million payload finished in time for launch, and just how stressful that is. And the thought, as a project manager, of having to deal with secondary payloads popping out that could go wrong, things could go bad. It just adds an extra dimension to the problem. Now there are policy things that can be done to actually solve that. But I took a pretty firm stand against the whole notion of siphoning off a little bit of mass on each of our launches for the CubeSat initiative because of that exact thing. I needed to get the sense that the policy problems would be solved so that we wouldn't be putting the primary missions at risk. And then the other is, and I'm just hoping this won't become a problem, but is the whole space orbital debris issue. You know, these things may not, depending on the trajectories they're on, they may not come back down right away, and so end up with having just more contentions during launch windows.
Like Galaxy 15 kind of?
Well, it doesn't even have to be that dramatic. What it has to be is, if there's more stuff up there, I don't know if you know this, but when we launch a mission, there's a group at the Air Force that's constantly keeping track of all of this stuff, and all of the stuff that's in space, all the way down to, you know, one of the astronauts' gloves, right? And when you establish a launch window, hours before launch, they come and they tell you, okay, you have a 5-minute window, but only 2.5 minutes of it are usable to you, because during that period, you're going to be flying up between these 2 bits of space debris or an operational spacecraft or that sort of thing. And so the more stuff that we put in space that's no longer usable, that doesn't return, becomes problematic just to get new stuff into space. So, and it doesn't even have to hit anything. It's just, you know.
More the track, more the clutter.
Yeah.
No, I think it was important for you to say those things, because if someone's going to say, you know what, I've got a few grand somewhere, I'm going to go and build something, those are concerns that they need to understand up front, that they may experience resistance for damn good reasons. I mean, there are, you know, I can well understand when you've got a $1 billion spacecraft on top of a stage vehicle, you don't want some little digital monkeys riding your back all the way there, because they might get in the way.
Well, and you might not get a warm reception from guys like me.
Yes.
You know?
No,
that doesn't necessarily mean that we're opposed to what you're trying to do.
There's a danger where you're not going to get a reception for the people who are footing the bill, because the next generation is asleep in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. I'm not joking, right? I mean,
yeah.
we haven't captured his attention, and I'm not. It's our fault, not his, right? And that's the real danger, right? And I think that's the part that the participatory part that we still haven't figured out. Is that I don't feel, I'm doing a space conference, I don't feel connected to the space program.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I
pay a lot of my paycheck to
I was
it.
like,
Right?
$500, you hear that? You can save your money. Wake up, wake up.
You know, I also don't think that y'all should take that issue on your own shoulders alone. All right? It has to do with our culture today as well. I mean, how many people know today that there are NASA medical physicians helping to try and keep the Chilean miners alive?
Sure.
Right? But how many people know that we were flying sorties over the Gulf to help guide the boats that were cleaning up the oil spills? You know, our UAVs were out nearly daily looking for oil slicks.
And the astronauts were taking wide-scale images of that entire region of the Gulf from orbit.
Right, and I think part of the problem is our
robotically for a lot cheaper and
but,
taking pictures.
But I think part of the problem is our society hears that sort of stuff and it's good news, and so it goes in one ear and out the other, and nobody remembers it. You know,
the bad news gets remembered.
I think that's how, so. You got to start being the what did you call it, death monster or evil supervillain,
Yeah.
so that people will remember what you're doing.
Why isn't there a story behind it?
And I don't necessarily buy that positive news don't make a story. Look at the comment section sometimes of positive stories that run on CNN. There was a story recently about a 3-year-old little girl that, you know, her dad was in medical trouble. She walked 2 blocks to the fire station to save her father's life. The commentary section was interesting because every other comment was, my God, CNN, why the heck aren't you publishing stories like this every day?
Yeah, yeah.
There is a story behind it. It just has to be the right story.
Bill
Right.
Moyer said something really interesting to me. I guess it was on the anniversary of the Apollo 13. He was talking to Larry King, and they're talking about Apollo 13, and Bill Moyer turned to Larry King and he said, "Why don't we remember this?" And my head just went.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Moyers was in the administration at the time, at least during the Johnson administration, and he didn't remember Apollo 13. It just flattened me.
I remember.
How are you going to deal with something like that?
Ira Glass defines a story as a series of anecdotes. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. An ending, because stories have to end, and then a moment of reflection, into what we have learned kind of thing and all. I think most space projects have a problem because we're a series of anecdotes. With this happened, and this happened, we delivered this data, we did this and this. They often don't have an ending, and they never have a moment of recollection, or reflection rather. So that's what I mean by story. We're very good at reporting facts and details, but crafting a story takes something else. I've been getting good media attention with Project Calliope, NPR interview, Wired interview, Discovery interview, because it's a story. I have the midlife crisis anecdote. I have the fact that I'm building this in my basement. It was just for fun that I got into it, not really knowing everything, but figuring out that I would figure it out. So there's a story, and there's going to be an end. It's going to be finished. It's going to be sent off, and hopefully my agent's going to get me a book deal, but that's not part of the story. And then there'll hopefully be a moment of reflection in the whole narrative. But the ending and the moment of reflection are something that needs to be in these stories. Now, it's hard. We're in a new space age. We have Martin, we have SpaceX, and all of these companies building. We're getting our anecdotes building. But we have to have at least checkpoints. The X Prize was a great thing because there was a prize. There was, 26 companies entering. 5 of them did test launches. 1 of them succeeded, and there was an ending. And then you've got that moment of reflection, and we've entered a new space age. We need more of those. For microsatellites, we need someone to come up and craft a narrative for it.
Maybe we need to get Mr. Diamandis into this, see if he can come up with a prize again.
Prizes are excellent stories.
X Prize Foundation in general, just the X Prize Foundation in general,
Yeah,
They're watching
I'm
right
being
now.
slightly facetious.
You talk to the camera, they're watching right now.
But maybe Peter can do something interesting here, too.
Right. But I think it's connecting maybe to the flight opportunity too, and that's maybe the new piece that hasn't existed en masse at least.
And it's still somewhat in the future, right?
Yeah.
Except for the NanoRat.
There was an educational satellite, or pair of satellites that was launched not too far ago. They're basically disco balls, and the schools are all
Starshine.
involved. And
Yeah.
what was it?
Starshine.
Starshine, that's right. Were those getaway specials?
Yep. Those would all get specials.
She mentioned doing something visual. I would like to see somebody try that again. I mean, the only problem with them was the magnitude was too dim. People couldn't see them. To redo that, get the schools involved again in something like that, something a little bit more visible. One of the things I do programs at Blackville Park from time to time. I love it when interesting satellites come over on the night we're doing a stargazing program. Unfortunately, aside from iridium flares, the most interesting satellite I've ever seen, you need binoculars to see. It's a satellite called EG, Japanese geodesic satellite. You look at it in a pair of binoculars and you see this box. That would be cool. Iridium flares have really provoked a lot of public interest. People will go out and heavensabove.com, people will go out and schedule their evenings to go look at a -8 magnitude iridium flare. If you could get something that dances and maybe has some nice color to it,
We need the heavens
people
above
would
the
go out.
microsatellite community. A site that's telling some of the interesting tales, that has the resources if you want to get involved, that lists all the possible launch things. That's a nice model.
Some community, yeah. A community site for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anybody heard of Dobson Space Telescope?
Dobsonian?
Dobson Space Telescope.
I remember something RPI students were working on
No.
well before that, before the Hubble telescope.
A spin-off from Berlin Technical University. They have an idea for using a 1U CubeSat, the laser, for space advertising.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But what would they shine, what would they illuminate? from the laser?
Apparently, they would just project the laser down towards the surface of the Earth, and I heard some talk here, and it kind of reminded me of that.
Would that be safe to do? I mean, they just came out with the green lasers, some of them were cheap.
Well, it's not.
Distance
It's not a 400 megawatt laser. It's
Cool. Well, thanks for coming, guys.
Probably
And I did put a lot of these links and stuff in the wiki, so if you want to check that out and add to it or whatever. Hopefully this inspired somebody. I know I was. You need anecdotes. Cool.
sidetracked in another conversation. I looked at your presentation.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really a presentation. It was more of a conversation about this scene here. Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
satellites.
Yeah, but mostly just talking about kind of the opportunities, any interest, kind of thing.
Were there perhaps any tangible projects that have spacecraft design or mission for the next few days? I mean, sorry, next few months or years?
Yeah, mostly what we talked about, I think, is just
What was the name of the
like there was
satellite
an opportunity.
Yeah, my brain is.
There was an opportunity that's coming up on the International Space Station. One guy, I guess,
Was that
from
the mirror involved?
that
I think they were like maybe size of
excuse me,
basketball or
basically
something.
Yeah.
for accommodation on the International
And they
Space
had
Station.
mirrors,
So
like a big
basically,
Base, certain space available?
yeah, exactly. They have some. I think it's just an ELC palette. If you guys know what that is.
Just wanted to provide input from the AMSAT side. ARISSAT 1 or SUTSAT 2 project converted into ARISSAT 1
Okay.
is the amateur radio.
That was the Russian. That's the Russian spacesuit, right?
It was the spacesuit,
Yeah.
but the electronics were gutted, and then they were moved to a separate external cabinet, which will be going up on the last space shuttle.
Okay.
And then once installed, it will be actually taken by an astronaut and actually let go from the astronaut as a free floater.
Cool.
Following the space station orbit.
Cool.
But it will be an amateur radio payload with a science experiment. So it's a Russian university.
Some telemetry that's meaningful.
People going out taking pictures.
The experiment is being conducted by the Russian university itself, but that gives us hope that in the future, when the space station is fully active, and resupplied with a continuous flow of, the supply vehicles, perhaps CubeSats can be launched into low Earth orbit from the ISS.
Right, and then we kind of talked a little bit too about the idea of the concern of Jim Watson. I forget his name now, Jim. But he basically works in Science Mission Director at Headquarters, and he kind of has a problem with some of these, accommodating some of these things on more expensive spacecraft, because there's always extra margin on mass on some of these spacecraft, So like these big billion-dollar satellites have extra mass they can accommodate. Problem is, the